Deku? I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. Chapter 42. The best. Katsuki woke up with a headache, and immediately sat bolt upright as he remembered what had happened in his last match. Fuck! Shit, that fucking bastard! He looked around to see he was in a plain cement room, which was empty except for Midnight and Recovery Girl, who were looking at him warily. Good morning, dearie, Recovery Girl said. You'd better get up. The medal ceremony will be starting soon. No! Katsuki growled. I'm not going. What do you mean you're not going? Midnight sighed. You won the sports festival. You have to go. I didn't win shit. Now get icy hot in here. I need a rematch. You won fair and square, dearie. I really don't know why. Before he knew it, he was in Recovery Girl's face, with explosions popping in each hand. Get his ass